Code Vein 2 is being developed with a very clear mindset, not to reinvent the identity of the first game, but rather to evolve what already worked. Partners, blood codes, and drain attacks with a more ambitious structure and a more striking narrative hook. From what has been released, it seems the studio is betting on a more cinematic sequel with a strong central concept, using time as a weapon and traversing the past and present of the same world, because this naturally helps vary the scenery, pacing, and story revelations without abandoning the post-apocalyptic tone of the original. The part that catches my attention the most is how they're selling the character Lou as a structural piece of the game. She saves the protagonist by sharing her own heart and even allows travel 100 years into the past, which sounds like the perfect excuse to justify encounters with revenants at key moments and rewrite fates. On the video game side of things, it feels like development was guided by feedback on what the audience enjoyed most in the first one, builds and synergies. The producer's own words reinforce that they brought back familiar systems, drain attacks, partner system, and blood code, so the feeling is one of continuity, a let's deliver more Code Vein, just more robust kind of vibe. And this more robust seems to come mainly from the partner system. The idea of switching between a partner fighting independently and a form of fusion or assimilation, according to official materials, sounds like a way to make AI co-op less passive and more tactical, almost as if the partner becomes part of your combat kit at specific moments. Another clue as to how the project is being handled is the care in promoting a character creator demo with multiple save slots that transfer to the final game, plus features like photo mode and different lighting environments to view the character. This screams, we know the community will spend hours here, so customization seems to be a pillar that the team decided to polish and turn into a showcase before launch. This late January release gives me a safe window vibe for a major ARPG, with pre-orders and multiple editions already announced, which usually accompanies a well-planned marketing cycle and confidence in the base package. Now, the question that remains, looking only at what has been released, is whether the promise of traveling between past and present will truly impact level design and choices, or if it will just be another narrative seasoning on top of a very traditional action RPG structure. From what has been released so far, the story seems to want to be more direct regarding the world's big problem, but at the same time more emotional regarding the bond between the protagonist and Lou, and that to me is a good sign. Bandai has already made the engine of the drama clear. You die on a mission, and Lou brings you back by sharing her own heart, which immediately places the two in a relationship of debt, intimacy, and shared purpose. The main trigger for the chaos also seems well-defined, the appearance of the Luna Rapaces, turning revenants into horrors and pushing the world toward collapse. This is the kind of premise that works because it creates urgency and an easy-to-understand doomsday clock without needing 20 hours of lore to justify why you are descending into ruins and facing monsters. The riskiest and most interesting move is the story existing in two timelines, the present and 100 years in the past, with time travel being an inevitable part of the narrative flow. If this is well written, it can deliver that classic feeling of a foretold tragedy. You know the consequence in the present and go to the past trying to avoid exactly that, knowing that any adjustment may have a price. And there is a detail that, personally, makes me curious. Bandai itself describes that in the past, revenants rule and maintain order within human society after the collapse caused by the resurgence. This suggests a story that is less good humans versus tragic vampires and more about politics or social structure, with hierarchies and houses like Voda House influencing research and decisions that may have created the problem or made it worse. Another thing that looks very promising is the idea of altering fates of characters in the past, because this opens space for the drama of choice and consequence with emotional weight, not just cosmetic dialogue choices. The producer also commented that players can choose to return to the past to change a character's outcome or move forward, and that this impacts the larger outcome of the story, which gives the impression of multiple endings with a focus on who you decide to save or abandon. At the same time, you can feel they are trying to protect themselves narratively from the first game. It was stated that the stories are separate and that the team didn't want to create a sequel that could erase the outcome fans achieved in the original Code Vein. This gives me the vibe of a new parallel universe that allows for more daring choices without being chained to canon. But it also runs the risk of feeling disconnected if the writing doesn't compensate with strong characters. My impression is that Code Vein 2 is betting on a melancholic fantasy of fixing the inevitable, a crumbling world, a partner literally linked to your heart, and a time travel journey that gives you power, but also responsibility, to mess with the fate of others. If Bandai gets the tone right, it could be a much more memorable story than just anime souls with vampires, because the conflict stops being just about surviving and becomes about deciding which future is worth the cost of being created. The gameplay of Code Vein 2 seems to follow the path of evolving what was already good without trying to reinvent the wheel. The combat system remains focused on reading movement, timing, and resource management, but now with more layers. The Forme, which are special abilities divided into combat, magic, and support, provide a sense of deep customization, as if each weapon could become an extension of your personal strategy. What caught my attention most was the refinement of the partner system. Now they can be summoned to fight by your side or assimilated, making you stronger in direct combat. This is a cool move because it makes AI co-op less passive. You choose whether you want an active ally or if you prefer to channel their power into yourself, and this totally changes the rhythm of battles. The restorative offering, where the partner can bring you back to life, is both a reward and a risk. You return to the game, but they are out for a while. This creates interesting tension. You can abuse the safety the partner provides, but if you depend on it too much, you risk being left alone at the most critical moment. Another strong point is the blood code system and build customization. The game promises freedom to build your style. You can focus on physical damage, magic, support, or even agility, all depending on the skills you equip and the blood codes you choose. This gives me that feeling of, I can try many things without feeling stuck in a single path. Exploration also seems more open, with connected areas and worlds divided between present and past. This is great because it expands the sense of discovery and environmental variety, besides allowing the world to change visually depending on the era you're in. Boss combat remains intense, with large enemies and unique mechanics, and the variety of weapons, 7 types according to trailers, promises to keep combat fresh, as each should have its own synergies with Forme and blood codes. Overall, from what has been shown, the gameplay of Code Vein 2 looks like a solid upgrade of the original, deeper, more tactical, and with more customization options, without losing the essence of a Souls-like with its own identity. If the balance and progression are well done, it could be an experience that pleases both those who enjoy a challenge and those who like to experiment with different builds. Based on the trailers and official materials, the graphics of Code Vein 2 seem less like a technical revolution and more like a leap in polish, more detailed, better material rendering, and a use of light that enhances the melancholic atmosphere the series enjoys. The feeling that remains is that Bandai wants the game to look more expensive and cleaner on screen, without losing the gothic anime style that defines Code Vein's identity. What gives me the most confidence, curiously, is the heavy emphasis on character creation and how they're selling the look as part of the package. The character creator demo mentions testing your character in different lighting environments and even using photo mode, which to me is an indicator that they really cared about how skin, hair, makeup, and accessories react to light, something that companies tend to avoid showcasing when it's poorly done. In terms of world design, what was shown suggests strong visual variety: flooded ruins, a dark forest, and an isolated island, all with that stylized post-apocalyptic tone. Even without knowing how exploration will be in practice, you can see that the team is trying to differentiate biomes and color palettes so it doesn't turn into that eternal gray that gets tiring after a few hours. Another thing to note is that the environments seem more readable during combat than in the first game, at least in the edited material they released. This could just be a well-edited trailer, but the contrast between character and enemy and scenery seems better. And in an action game, that counts for a lot, because visual clarity is also part of the challenge. Regarding the characters, what was disclosed maintains the focus on strong silhouettes and exaggerated details, clothes, accessories, weapons, but with slightly more convincing textures and materials. I still feel that high-end anime look more than realism, but now with a polish that helps sell metal, leather, and fabrics without everything looking like a flat shader. It's also hard not to link the graphics to the fact that the game is aiming for PC, PS5, and Xbox Series, with no promise for the last generation. Even without Bandai listing specific technologies like ray tracing, the platform cut alone suggests a larger budget for environment density, draw distance, and effects, instead of being stuck with old limitations. My personal impression, just from what the developer has shown, is that Code Vein 2 will be the type of game where the visuals work more through the overall package, art direction, lighting, and characters, than by pushing pixels to the limit. If the final version maintains the consistency of the promotional material, especially lighting and sharpness and motion, we can expect a result that is much more beautiful and premium than the first, without abandoning the aesthetic that makes Code Vein what it is. From what Bandai has officially released so far, the performance of Code Vein 2 seems like it will be one of those cases where it depends a lot on the platform and your target FPS, because the PC requirements material already assumes very specific targets: 1080p 30 FPS on low and 1080p 60 FPS on high. This, to me, is an honest sign. They aren't promising locked 4K for everyone, but rather setting expectations in the most down-to-earth way possible. On PC, what stands out is how the jump to 60 FPS at 1080p on the high preset requires a much stronger machine, RTX 3080 or RX 6800, and very beefy CPUs, which suggests that the game may be CPU intensive and have denser scenarios and effects than the first Code Vein. I interpret this as the game will be beautiful, but not necessarily light, so those who usually play at the limit of their hardware might need to adjust settings without fear. Still, on PC, the fact that the official page recommends an SSD for the 1080p 60 FPS high configuration gives me the impression that environment streaming and fast loading are part of the design, probably due to larger areas and more constant transitions. This usually helps the flow of the game, but it can also mean stuttering if the game is poorly optimized or if the storage is slow, and that's the kind of thing that can only be confirmed close to launch. On consoles, Bandai wasn't as specific with numbers in the official material I saw, so it remains in the realm of expecting the standard for PS5 and Xbox Series, a performance mode targeting 60 FPS and a quality mode with more resolution and effects. I saw news mentioning that a performance mode option exists, but since it's not a detailed technical sheet from Bandai itself, I would still treat it as something to be confirmed with patch notes and launch reviews. My personal concern, looking only at the trailers, is the old combination of fast action plus many effects plus particles plus large enemies. Code Vein 2 seems to have flashy strikes, magic, and visually heavy combat scenes, so if the optimization isn't solid, that's exactly where frame drops usually appear, and in a parry-heavy game, that carries more weight than in a turn-based RPG. On the other hand, the fact that they are already communicating estimated performance targets, stable above 30 and stable above 60, is something that gives me a little more confidence because it shows there is a clear internal target. When a studio publicly commits to estimates like this, the chance of at least trying to maintain consistency is usually higher than when they just throw generic requirements out there. My reading is, if you're playing on PC, go in with a fine-tuning mindset, especially if you want 60 FPS. And if you're playing on consoles, the safest expectation is to prioritize performance mode to maintain fluidity. And since there is only pre-release material so far, the real test will be day one. Frame stability during bosses and open areas, loading times, and especially stuttering, which is the silent killer of modern ARPGs. It's hard to guarantee that Code Vein 2 will be a revolution, but it has clearly evolved significantly compared to the first title, especially in combat, customization, and world exploration. The blood drainage system and blood codes are back, but now with new weapons, mechanics like forma, and combat partners more integrated into the gameplay, which promises to give more depth to builds and strategies. For those who enjoy Soul-style action RPGs with a focus on tactical combat, character customization, and dark narratives, Code Vein 2 seems to be a solid choice. The story involving time travel, the threat of the horrors, and the role of the revenants brings an intriguing premise, even though some fans of the original were divided over the narrative direction. If you enjoy experimenting with different builds, facing challenging bosses, and exploring post-apocalyptic worlds, this is your kind of game. The game looks very polished, with a cleaner interface and more fluid combat than the first one. But as always, launches bring risks of bugs, unadjusted balancing, and perhaps some mechanics that only make sense after a few weeks of updates. If you're patient, waiting might be the best option to enjoy a more refined product. If you can't wait, the launch offers the excitement of being among the first to explore everything, including the character creation demo that is already available. I'm still in doubt about whether I would buy it at launch. I think I'll take a look at the first reviews and see if fans are complaining about bugs or serious problems before deciding. But I confess that the character creation demo made me quite excited, and the idea of exploring worlds in different eras is truly interesting. If you're the type who likes to dive headfirst into everything new, Code Vein 2 might be worth it at launch. But if you prefer to play something more stable, waiting a few weeks or even a few months might be safer. Regardless, the game looks promising and deserves the attention of fans of the genre.
And even when the stars seem far away,